Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. This is Imran with ACC, and we got an exciting program for you today with the one and only Ustad and Sheikh Ubaydullah Evans. Today we're going to be discussing the etiquette of debate and disagreement. Before we begin, I want to give a quick shout out to TISA, who is our co-sponsor or is the co-sponsor for today's event. TISA, the Islamic Seminary of America, is a program of the Islamic Seminary Foundation. I'm sorry, TISA is a graduate school in Richardson, Texas, dedicated to connecting and equipping American Muslim scholars and leaders with research-based practices and training rooted in the Quran and Sunnah. By integrating the rich traditions of classical Islamic knowledge with contemporary scholarship, the institution has already done so much for the community. TISA provides significant student financial aid, has established a lending library, publishes the Journal of Islamic Faith and Practice, and offers mental health first aid workshops and other proposed training through its new Center for Ethical and Effective Leadership. To learn more about TISA, please visit them online at www.islamicseminary.us. And I'm here once again with the one and only the Sheikh of GQ.
No, no. Yeah, as soon as you said one and only, I
You
just
knew
put
it.
my head. I put
Yeah.
my head down and said, "Oh man, this brother always gives me a hard time." But mashallah, I love you, Imran. I love the work that you do.
Thank you, bro.
I love a continuous charity. I love Tissa. So
Alhamdulillah.
we have the combination of a lot of things that we really appreciate this evening. Mashallah.
And we love you, Sheikh. We're happy that you're always with us and able to join us when we have questions for you and when we want to learn from you and discuss different
Mm.
topics. So today was titled the ethics the ethics of debate. But I also want to kind of throw in the word disagreement into that.
Mm.
Not to echo or discuss something maybe specifically, but you know, with the advent of the internet and social media and being able to get knowledge in a very convenient manner, I think we've seen an onset of trolling to some extent. But then we've also
Mm-hmm.
seen, other than trolling, they're genuine, sincere people who like to offer their opinions on every single matter regarding
Mm-hmm.
the affairs of individuals or
Mm-hmm.
politics, socioeconomics, what have you. So the first question is, when you think of this word debate and dialogue, is this something that we should encourage, disagreement and debate and dialogue? Is this something that we tend to frown away from? What are some of the first thoughts that come to your mind when we just mentioned the title of today's lecture?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulih al-Kareem wa ba'd. When I think about the etiquette of debate or the etiquette of disagreement, I think about trying to provide some operational norms, trying to provide some rules to regulate a process that is inevitable. The idea that we're all going to agree about anything, whether we're talking about something as mundane as the greatest basketball player of all time, and of course, everybody knows is Michael Jordan, or we're talking about something significant about what kind of relationship our community should have with LGBT people who identify as LGBT. There's going to be a lot of disagreements. There's going to be a lot of opinions. And one of the things that I think Islam, offers is a way not to be relativist. We are not moral relativists. We don't, the best analogy that I could give for relativism is if we're looking at a color and someone says the color we're looking at is white, and someone says it's black, and someone says it's green, and someone says it's red. We all disagree. Now, if somebody comes in and says, well, you're all right, that's relativism. Like, in attempting to ameliorate the conflict, they're, kind of deflating our pursuit of absolute and real with the capital R, truth with the capital T. That is not from our tradition, right? We actually believe that God's will can be uncovered and intuited by these fallen, fallible human beings. However, inasmuch as none of us singularly possesses access to the knowledge of God's will, right? We all have the same tools, right? The adillah, right? The Quran, the Sunnah, and all of the various and sundry techniques that the usuliyun have used to arrive at what God wants from us, right? Qiyas and the opinions of the companions, and right, these are kind of the rules of engagement. These are the terms upon which we disagree. There is still always going to be differences in deduction. You know, how you understand this or how you understand that, or how this should be implemented or how that should be implemented. And what we have to find a way to do is holding our position passionately, right? And fervently where necessary. I think, something that is often lost in these exchanges is I find it refreshing when people have ghairah for the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When they feel like something must be said about this because the deen of Allah ta'ala, which is inviolable, is being transgressed or it's being violated. And I owe it to myself, I owe it to my tradition, I owe it to our predecessors who sacrificed their lives to see to it that this tradition could arrive to us in as unadulterated a manner as possible. I owe it to all of them to say what I deem to be true and to point out what I deem to be wrong. None of the passion that animates that is wrong to me. The question of the etiquette of debate or disagreement is, after you feel all of that, after you say what needs to be said, how will you deal with the fact that somebody disagrees with you?
Mm.
How will you deal with the fact that, okay, we understand why you spoke, we understand what's motivating you, and your motivation is wholesome. Your motivation is Allah. It's not anything else. It's not animosity. It's not rancor. It's not iniquity. You're motivated by wanting idharul haq, is what we say in Arabic, just wanting to make the truth prominent. But what happens when someone that is also motivated by the same things
Right.
disagrees with you? How will you handle that? And the first thing is, recognizing that Allah Ta'ala mentions in the Quran, in more than one place, فَاللَّهُ يَحْكُمُ بَيْنَهُمْ فِي مَا كَانُوا يَخْتَلِفُونَ. Allah will judge between them in that which they used to differ. That there are some things in this dunya that are simply inconclusive. We can't arrive at a definitive answer that will satisfy everybody. There are some things that we're always going to disagree about. And we have to be content, as Imam Shafi'i famously said, believing that we're right with the possibility that we could be wrong, and believing that the other person is wrong with the possibility that they could be right. And if we really can grow to a place of appreciation of this divine wisdom. See, anyone that is frustrated by disagreement is essentially frustrated by the qadr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Mm.
Because if it were God's will that we would all disagree, we would all agree, we wouldn't be disagreeing.
Mm.
So
Mm.
this is, and this isn't from the Quran or the Sunnah or even an authoritative writer. This is just from me. I think often about this question, and I think that in addition to standing up for the truth, which is a test, right?
Mm.
God, al-amr bil ma'ruf wa nahyu 'anil munkar is a religious obligation. So you have to do a nahyu 'anil munkar. You have to stand up and speak out against what is wrong. I think Allah gives you an additional test. After you do that, how will you comport yourself knowing that people disagree with you? And you might get ajr from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You might get reward from Allah because you commanded to what was good or you forbade what was evil. But then you could get some wizr or some ithm, some sin, because in disagreement you insulted your Muslim brother, you humiliated your Muslim sister, you belittled your brother, right? You use sultan, right? You put a bad construction on something that was open to multiple interpretations that you saw from your brother. So it's like you're doing good and you're doing bad simultaneously. You know what I'm saying?
So in that case, you mentioned having husnul dhan, like having good expectations, or just giving your brothers and sisters the benefit of the doubt. Can we have give them the benefit of the doubt, but at the same time potentially criticize a certain opinion that they hold or a certain action of theirs, but doing it wholeheartedly? So I think I know your answer, but then the question, if you can now expound on that by answering, what is the layperson's role when two people who are more knowledgeable are going back and forth about certain issues?
Well, I mean, the way that they used to talk about this is, I'm thinking about it kind of in the framework of what's called ijtihad, like, deduction from text. They would say that ijtihad of the text is for those qualified to do ijtihad. But ijtihad of the mujtahids, meaning judging between who you like, whose scholarship is more compelling to you, is something that you have to do. So there's no way, I'm not a mujtahid. I'm not a scholar of the text, right? But in terms of listening to different opinions from different people, there's no way of skirting my responsibility to make a choice. I think this is wrong, or I think this is right. I think, kind of like the first part of the question I wanted to address, if I could.
Please.
Yes. Believing that someone is sincere does not in any way mean that you believe that they're correct. Right? I actually think that it is better and more intellectually rigorous if you take for granted that everyone that argues anything is sincere. I think that leaves you, I've never really had an appetite for polemics where a person misrepresents the arguments of the other side, because it shows that maybe they aren't as sincere. But a real intellectual, a real thinker, puts the best construction on the argument of the person with whom she disagrees or he disagrees, and then they dismantle their argument. You see, it's like you take for granted that, I think the person is probably sincere. They probably think this is the best thing for the community. They probably think that there's a lot of legitimacy for what they're doing. They probably think that what they're doing is consistent with prophetic practice. I disagree. And then you begin to talk about how you disagree. It's not necessary for me to call them they're insincere, they're irredeemably wicked. They want, they're involved in a covert plot to destroy Islam. It's like, no, what if they're not any of that, but they're just wrong?
Wrong.
They're just wrong.
Right? And that's what I wanted to ask you, is why is it that every time people have, and the next question, and you can go back to the previous question if you want, but it seems like when people make it about the creed or the fundamentals or foundations of the faith, aqidah, that this is when people get into some hot water, and this is when people get hot and heavy and start disagreeing very passionately. But the question is, how many times can we turn to that argument by saying that no, there's no gray area in this topic. This is black or white, and the person has to believe it this way.
It's interesting, man. I think it's because our nafs. I really believe it's because you get personally involved with the argument, so that not only do you dislike the wrong thing the person is saying or the wrong thing the person is doing, you actually start to dislike the person. And that begins to kind of show itself. And that's a really, really bad thing, man. And I think learning how to dislike what someone is saying without having any personal animosity toward
mm,
them
mm,
is really an art. And I think that we have the example of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That, I mean, do you know how many of the Sahaba radiallahu anhum jami'an were erstwhile enemies of the Prophet alayhi wasallam?
mm,
People that actively fought him, people that made attempts on his life, people that hired hitmen to kill his uncle, radiallahu anhu. The hitman who killed his uncle, radiallahu anhu. People that tracked the companions to Abyssinia, Amr ibn al-As, radiallahu anhu. People that, actively spread untruths about the Prophet, alayhi wasalam, Abu Sufyan, radiallahu anhu. We're talking about the Prophet, alayhi wasalam, when all of the people that I named, whether we're talking about Hind bint Utbah or Abu Sufyan or Khalid ibn Walid ibn al-Mughira or Amr ibn al-As, or these were people that if the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam had personal animosity toward them, like I personally don't like you,
mm,
because when they were disbelievers, how would he be able to embrace them after they accepted Iman?
mm,
His sunnah is a demonstration that I didn't like what you were saying because what you were saying was in violation of the tawheed of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But I never had anything against you personally. That's
mm,
why I can embrace you. You see? Whereas I think we as a Muslim community now, we actually have unprecedented historic levels of agreement in most things,
yep,
which is just, it shows that this is a human problem. Sheikh Yasir Qadi, hafidhahullah, he was saying that if you look at Muslims historically, the American Muslim community probably agrees about more than Muslim communities historically ever agreed about,
mm,
right? And yet we still oppose each other just as bitterly. We still oppose each other just as unapologetically.
mm,
And again, man, I mean, not to deflate what I'm hoping comes across as a substantive, real argument based in the text, but at the same time, just to speak to personal, just to make, okay, we're talking about these big ideas. Let's break this down into some, digestible chunks.
sure.
Let's say, I have, like, I'm a father to 3 children, right? I have 3 kids,
Mm,
mashallah. And let's say I was a strict disciplinarian. I'm really not, but you know what I'm saying? I probably need to be, you know what I'm saying? But let's say I was a strict disciplinarian, and let's say that I believed in spankings. Like, that I issued spankings when I deemed them, warranted.
mm,
If my children had a memory of me when they got older, spanking them, because I actually did get spanked when I was younger,
mm,
right?
mm,
Parenting has softened a lot,
mm,
mashallah, you know what I'm saying? But the thing that I remember about my mother spanking me,
mm,
I remember her being remorseful after she did it. And I don't remember her taking any perverse delight in striking me.
mm,
Now, I don't strike my children. It's just something that my wife and I have elected not to do, right? But when I think about my mother around certain things, I think about her as, there were certain things she didn't play about.
mm,
And when she felt that I needed to be chastised, she chastised me,
mm,
right? If, on the other hand, I remembered my mother gleefully gloating, taunting me, taking great pleasure, taking great delight in striking me, making fun of me as she struck me, even though the experience of being punished would be the same,
mm,
my recollection of the punishment would be completely different. Do you understand what I'm saying?
absolutely.
So it's not simply that one person in Muslim cyberspace is taking another person to task. They're taking the person to task in a way that is laced with so much sarcasm,
Mm,
so much humor, it appears to bring them so much joy. They appear to be so gleeful while doing it, when it's like, no, you should be rueful. You should be, you should, it's almost like they say, "Hubbuka shay yu'mi wa yusim." Love
mm,
of a thing makes you blind and deaf to it. It's
mm,
almost like, man, I love the jama'ah, I love my brother, or I love my sister, and it pains me to have to point out that they made a terrible mistake when they did this.
mm,
But for the sake of people who follow their example, I think it must be pointed out that this was wrong. That feels different than ha ha he, let's make jokes, let's offer one-liners. It's and the ironic thing to me is that I can't think of anything more postmodern than that. And we might deem ourselves like serious critics of postmodernity.
mm,
Religious criticism to your co-religionists over social media in a mocking tone.
mm,
What are we doing here?
mm.
And this we do in the name of tradition. What are we doing here?
There's nothing traditional about the approach in itself.
What
Mm,
are we doing here?
mm,
Right? And we're talking about media that are not made for seriousness. Social media is not, I mean, mashallah, some people use it for serious ends,
mm,
but it's a corporate tool
mm,
that's made to sell people things,
mm,
right? It's not made for seriousness. So even trying to, address my brother in 160 characters or whatever you get, I don't have any social media.
mm,
Then whatever you get, I don't know. It's like, come on, man. Treat this with some of the gravity and respect that it deserves. We're talking about a Muslim here whose honor is sacred,
mm,
whose blood is sacred,
mm,
whose property is sacred. We're talking about a Muslim here. Yes, sometimes we have to take Muslims to task. It's not that anything goes. Maybe I'll say something or I'll do something over the course of this interview that people will say, no, he was wrong about that. Abu
mm,
Sufyan, as I was thinking, Abu Sufyan never lied about the Prophet ﷺ, even when he was a non-Muslim.
mm,
Ubaydullah was wrong about that.
mm.
But take me to task with seriousness
Right.
and take me to task in a way that respects my dignity.
Mm,
I'm a Muslim. Respect that. And I think the only reason I'm getting a little bit angry about it is because some people can't see the utter contradiction in upholding the inviolability of the tradition, but you don't see me as having any inviolability. You can spit on me, you can throw me down, you can defame me, humiliate me in the name of protecting the tradition.
mm,
Now, what kind of logic is that?
mm. It's interesting that you mention everything that you've mentioned in the last 10 or so minutes, but because what I've seen in the last couple of years is when someone fits into the description that you just gave in terms of defending a certain position based on tradition, but they do it in the way that you described where they attack the other person personally, or they do it in a way that's not respecting that person's honor. Now that is while they may be right in their opinion or
Mm-hmm.
criticizing the other person's opinion, they're wrong in their approach.
Mm-hmm.
But what I've seen now is the people on the other side who are, say, A is attacking B, people who are on B side or defending B, they'll utilize the same tactics now. They'll be so disgusted by person A's approach, but then they're using the same approach themselves.
Now we're all down in the mud.
Hmm,
Now we're all down in the mud. And
hmm,
it's like Allah Ta'ala says, يَشُدُّ بَعْضُهُمْ بَعْضًا, that the believers are like a bunyan, marsus, they're like a fortified structure, and we're holding each other up,
hmm,
right? I'm trying to pull my brother up.
hmm,
Now we're pulling each other down. We're not a fortified structure anymore. We're like the froth, right?
hmm,
On top of the sea, right?
hmm,
We're like the froth on top of the water in the ocean, right? And we're just pulling each other down, or we're like quicksand to one another, so that, you know, You behave toward me with bad adab, so now I'm shooting. Now it's like I have to retaliate. Now you want to be mocking and sarcastic and use all kinds of ihana and tahakkum and sukhriya. Well, my turn to use sukhriya and ihana and
Mm,
tahakkum. And it's like, no, man, that's not. And this is the place where someone has to be bigger.
mm,
Someone has to be bigger, and someone has to be focused. I mean, dare I say it, on love.
mm.
That's what's really missing is love. My
Subhanallah.
brother, my brother can be wrong, and I love him. If
Subhanallah.
I didn't love him, I wouldn't tell him he was wrong.
Mm, mm, mm,
If I didn't love him, meaning if I didn't, because indifference is the opposite of love. If I didn't love you, then I wouldn't say anything. Hey, look, if Allah takes him to task for misleading all of these people, then not my problem. No, I'm only mentioning that it was wrong because I love you,
mm.
right? And I hope to mention it in a way where you will be receptive to what I'm saying. I mean, sometimes it's just like, just ask yourself, man, the person that you are criticizing, have you earnestly prayed for their hidayah?
Mm,
Have you earnestly prayed that God would guide them?
mm,
Have you actually, they say you'll never be able to guide during the day people you don't pray for at night.
mm.
Have you actually, prayed for them? This is a real question because the way that you engage them, you appear to like really personally dislike them.
Mm.
And it's actually quite unwise to think that someone you hate or someone about whom you have a very strong dislike will be receptive of anything you're saying about them.
It's a poor strategy. I was just thinking that you might actually be right in your criticisms, but because you're using the wrong tactics to talk or inform that person, you're not. It's not. The message is not even going to be received.
And then I'll take it one step further.
Mm,
Also, too, I think in your delivery of the message, if you think someone is wrong or this is someone with whom you disagree, you want to actually show your commitment to tazkiyah. You want to show your commitment to subduing and subjugating your own nafs, your own ego, so that it's not that I tell you what I think you did wrong or what I think is right, and then I look to be ingratiated by your acceptance of what I'm saying. Like I
mm,
tell you, and then I look and see, did you take down that post, or did you act on what I'm saying, or no, I tell you in a dispassionate way, or if I am passionate about the fact that I love you,
mm,
passionate about the fact that I think you're making a mistake, and then I just step off of it.
mm,
Allahumma fashhad inni balaght. Allah bear witness, I've delivered, I've said what I needed to say. Now, if the person takes my advice or doesn't take my advice, that will be up to them. That will be up to them. I'm not even going to check. I'm not even going to check whether you did or didn't. That'll be up to
mm.
you. But I think we often issue advice in ways that are so um, egotistical and just personal that a person can't accept what we're saying without feeling like they've been conquered. You see?
Yeah.
They
I,
feel like, and so sometimes a person is opposing you because it's like, you've pulled them into this egotistical zone, and it's like, I can't let you conquer me. So just because I can't let you conquer me, I have to continue defending what might obviously be wrong.
mm. It's interesting because I used to early on I would give a lot of people advice on health, and I realized
Mhm.
that early on it was personal, right? So if someone disagreed with a certain type of diet or dietary approach, or certain type of
Mhm.
exercising, or certain type of routine to keep their spine healthy, it would become personal. I would have like a disgusted look, and the approach is wrong. And you see when the approach is wrong, even though, as we mentioned already, the advice is correct and good for them, you've done
Mhm.
yourself such a disservice. um, even that knowledge that you've sought, right? Even though that knowledge that you've sought, it's almost useless because you're seeking that knowledge not only to benefit yourself, but you want to benefit others. but because of your
Mhm.
approach, people are not even able to benefit from it. So,
Yeah, no, it's Allah Ta'ala says, "Ud'u ila sabili rabbika bil hikmati wa maw'idatil hasana." Call to the way of your Lord with wisdom and beautiful exhortation,
mm,
right? Beautiful preaching. It's not wise, nor is it beautiful to humiliate somebody and attempt to insult them and to appear as though I don't know anyone's intent, but to even appear as though one is engaged in character assassination, right? Hold on one second, Emma.
yeah, of course, of course. So, brothers and
Asia,
sisters,
stop that while I do this. Don't do that until I finish.
so brothers and sisters, the event today, again, once again, if you're tuning in right now, is the etiquette of debate and disagreement, and our co-sponsor is the Islamic Seminary of America, and you can find them and find out more information about them at www.islamicseminary.us. And again, we're joined by our good brother, Sheikh
Alhamdulillah.
Ubaydullah Evans. Alhamdulillah. So go ahead, Sheikh. I'm sorry.
No. So I just think that we have to be you know every time we critique or criticize someone, it gives us an opportunity to be introspective. It's like if I'm going to talk about someone else, uh, it almost it should be yani, uh, almost automatic. I've given some thought to my state and myself. You know what I'm saying? I mean, they go
Mm,
hand in hand. I mean, how can I get past who I am
mm.
to talk about who somebody else is? It's unthinkable, man. Unthinkable, some of this stuff.
I'm gonna give you the last word, but before I do, because I know you got a class to teach. I was doing some homework and some research. You already used my Imam Shafi quote, so I can't use that. Uh, but there were some principles of disagreement that I was researching that I actually found very beneficial, and you've already mentioned some of them indirectly. So one of them was disagree with the opinion, but love the person.
Hmm.
Number two, climb inside their skin to understand why they're coming to their decision and their opinion. And you mentioned something along those lines. Number three, separate the baby from the bathwater.
Hmm.
And number four, which you mentioned as well, respectfully disagree. Right? Disagree graciously.
Absolutely, man. It strengthens your position.
Mm,
I read a quote from I think it might have been Desmond Tutu or something like that, but it said, "Don't raise your voice, strengthen your argument."
mm,
You see, don't part of what some of the way that we disagree reveals is that we really don't trust each other, man. That's what it
mm,
really reveals. We don't trust each other. That
mm,
we actually don't trust that if I tell you the truth and you disagree with me, it's because you actually don't agree.
mm,
We actually I think we'd want to convince ourselves it's because I'm upholding the truth and you're trying to destroy Islam, or it's because I'm interested in God's favor, but you're interested in popularity, or it's like, what if the person just doesn't agree with you, man? And that's something that you'll have to live with, and this and I'm surprised, some stuff. It's like, okay, I can understand much more easily if it's coming from like a non-married person. I think some stuff is like, if you're not married, then I get it. Like,
mm,
mashallah, you're in the nusus, you're
mm,
in the text,
mm,
and your world is one that I would describe as very idealistic,
mm,
right? You have very naive, idealistic kind of notions of truth and theory and praxis and the convergence of the two, and right. But after you get married, it would just appear to me to be a very fertile ground to learn compassion and disagreement. You know what I'm saying? To learn that, sometimes, now, no matter how compelling one's argument is, the other person just simply does not agree. And there's nothing you can say or do about it, you
Mm.
know. And you just have to let that go. And it's always disappointing when we prove ourselves incapable of doing that.
So I'm gonna summarize a little bit of what you said, and then I'll give you the final word, and we'll close up. But
Sure.
essentially, disagreement and debate is okay, right? So, and,
Mm-hmm.
if I'm correct, interject if I'm wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And also, disagreeing passionately and strongly is fine, as long as the love and the respect and the sincerity is there in terms of why you're disagreeing and how you're disagreeing. But we should not shy away from uh, intellectually critiquing other people's opinions or stances on things, but obviously escalating it properly, right? So you don't
Mm-hmm.
go from not advising the person privately or making, like you said, even before that, making dua for them, or praying for them at night, right?
Mm-hmm.
Before you even reach out. But then also maybe advice to the lay people when you see dialogue going on between two brothers or sisters who are older and more respectful and scholarly, maybe stay out of it if you agree with
Mm-hmm.
that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that really is at the crux of the issues, right? Do things with ikhlas, with sincerity, with love, and also know your place.
Yeah, mashallah. I think that summarizes it, quite nicely.
Yeah. Okay. And any last words for us, Sheikh, before we depart?
Sometimes disagreement is the outcome of differing vantage points. Sometimes, and I would hope that we would get to a place where we could appreciate some of that. You know what I'm saying? It's
Mm,
almost like, I mean, I'll take a controversial issue. Um, Look at the LGBT debate. I guess, I mean, it really is, from a hukum shari'i point of view, there is no debate. I mean, this
mm,
is something that, as far as I'm concerned, can't be reconciled with any notion of Islamic legitimacy. It's something that is haram lil ghaya, absolutely haram. Um, from the standpoint of Muslims who identify as such, right? I might sit in my office and just look at the text. I'm looking at legal works. I'm looking at the Quran. I'm looking at the dhawahir, the outward import of clear either dhahir or nas text from the Prophet ﷺ,
mm,
which means, dhahir meaning something that allows a slight ihtimal, a slight probability of interpretation. Dhahir, something that allows no probability. I mean, nas rather, something that allows no probability of different interpretations, right? And I'm sitting in my office and I'm thinking, this is clearly not a legitimate choice that anyone who is a believing Muslim can make or justify, right? I talked to a friend of mine who's working as a chaplain. And although I myself have never really come face to face with any such person, I've never really come face to face with any such person. But my friend who works as a chaplain, and this is a true story, he comes face to face with people who are struggling with this sin all the time.
mm,
My first question to him is, do you tell them that what they're doing is impermissible in Islam?
mm,
And his answer is, it depends. It depends. Sometimes I only talk to them about rahmah. I just talk to them about rahmah. I don't. Now, he did say, I don't ever justify. I don't ever pretend as though it isn't a sin. I never say everything is cool and it's okay. But my approach might be different if I suspect the person sitting in front of me is suicidal,
mm,
right? My approach might be different than yours sitting in a library. thinking
Mm.
about this issue. And in that moment, he and I actually, in terms of principle, we agree.
Mm.
In terms of approach, his approach looks different, or well, we don't have to go that far. He has an approach because he's dealing in a real world,
Mm.
where he's balancing competing priorities, all of which are legitimate. So
Mm.
he's thinking about, on the one hand, hifd the deen, like the maqsad of hifd the deen, and he's thinking about hifd al-hayah,
Mm.
the maqsad of like the preservation of life
Mm.
at the same time. And for me not to respect the complexity of that, because it's almost like, okay, I'm just thinking about hifd the deen. I'm thinking the religion must be preserved from these unconscionable compromises.
Mm.
But I'm not thinking about, there's someone in front of me who's thinking of taking their own life. What do I say to them in this moment? Right? Of course, I don't want to compromise the truth.
Of course.
And I'm not going to compromise the truth. Inshallah. But I don't want you to kill yourself either.
Mm.
Do you understand what I'm saying?
Of course.
My approach might be reflective. The difference in that, his approach is reflective of the difference in his priorities.
Mm.
You know what I'm saying? So, you have situations where Muslims get pulled into things. And I can tell that their intention is just to show that Muslims believe in like social justice, and it's like they actually intend to make a positive impression on people concerning what Islam is and what Islam teaches, right? And maybe pursuing that intention, they go too far and they cross a line. They
Mm.
go too far and they cross a boundary,
Mm.
right? They go too far and they do something that exceeds the limits of our religious practice. We have to correct them. We have to point out that, you went too far when you said this, right? If my friend was counseling that person and he said, everything is all good, God is inna Allah waliyul mu'mineen. God is the wali of the believers. And even though you identify as gay, God is your wali, right? God is your wali. And him being your wali means that he isn't displeased with you. Okay, he just went too far. He just said something untrue. Right? He just
Mm.
said something untrue. If he said he isn't displeased with you, he actually just said something that was untrue.
Mm.
And afterward, I'm going to tell him what you said was incorrect. But damn, excuse my language, but man, I couldn't respect the tense, the tight situation that he was in and trying to manage. Like, I couldn't respect, like, you said something wrong, but I understand I understand the jam. I understand where you were and what you were trying to do. And that's why we have Toba. That's why we have Toba. And that, what for me and a lot of these different conversations that are going on, it's like, yeah, some things happened that were wrong, but you don't understand the jam that they were in. You don't
Mm.
understand you don't appreciate at all the tenuous kind of precarious situation in which they were trying to make Islam appear amenable to ideas of social justice, etc., and uphold the truth. And a mistake was made. That happens, man.
Subhanallah.
Ask Allah to forgive you.
Mm.
I'm asking Allah to forgive you.
Mm.
And then after you ask Allah to forgive you, don't do it again and get out there and keep working, man.
Mm.
Keep trying to carry this thing to the places it needs to go. Because the
Subhanallah.
rest of us, we're talking to people that have niqabs and hijabs and beards.
Mm.
That's easy.
Mm.
You don't have to work hard to make Islam relevant to those people.
They're already on the trajectory.
They're already on the trajectory. But I'm trying to talk to the people out there with the tattoos and the pink hair and the piercings and have all kinds of very liberal notions of truth and righteousness and self-consciousness. And I'm trying to get them to see the light of Islam. My task is I got a much more. If I was sitting in the masjid and everybody was on the sunnah, we could just read Adab al-Mufrad. We could just read Sahih Bukhari. We have a great time. You know, we could just do a Maqra, recite the Quran. We have a great time. We'd all be uplifted. But I'm out there on the front line. I'm out there trying to talk to people in prison, gang members, people that have various and sundry backgrounds, and trying to make Islam relevant to them, trying to make Islam connect to their struggle. That's what da'wah is. And in the process, have I said some things that were wrong? Have I maybe done some things that were oversteps? And I'm sure I have. I'm hoping my community will forgive me and look to what I was intending even in my engagement, and recognize that, look, man, I have to be somewhat brave to even step out into that space. It would be safer for me to just go in the masjid and just teach the Sahih Sittah. But I'm out there. I'm trying to say something. You know, so don't hold me in contempt. Correct me lovingly, man.
Mercy.
And with mercy. I'm trying to do something out here, man. You know, and it's just like I don't like that. It gets me emotional because there's nothing like somebody sitting on the sideline talking, you know what? Man, get in the ring. Put the gloves on. Put the gloves on. And then when you're in the corner taking shots with me, you can tell me what I'm doing wrong. You see what I'm saying? When you in the corner taking shots with me, then you can tell me, you're not defending. You're not defending. You can do a better job. But when you in the audience, nah, man, I can't. Nah, man. Just appreciate that I'm in the ring.
I remember we'll close at this, but I remember when I was a kid, I was about 11, and we were playing basketball, and two kids started fist fighting. So we all became cheerleaders, and we were giving advice, and one kid clearly didn't want to fight. So an elderly person, someone who's older, came by and said, "Why don't you guys fight then? Why don't you guys jump in and fight instead?" Everyone stayed quiet.
Yeah, it's like if I'm doing that bad a job, hey man, relieve me of the post, because I would love to just sit in the masjid, man, and teach tafsir. I would love that. To sit with religious students and just teaching them Sharia, just teaching them, fiqh. I would love that. And that's a lot of what I do. But these brothers that are trying to talk to these activists that have some very far-flung ideas, these people that have given themselves to a very strange strand of philosophical liberalism. And you're trying to be there and trying to relate, and it's a task, man, and for one, I appreciate it.
Sheikh, we could probably talk for another hour on this. I know in about 10 minutes, I believe you have a class.
Yeah,
so
I do.
As always, we appreciate you and your knowledge and your passion on the topics, and may Allah reward you and reward your family with goodness and preserve you. Preserve all of us, inshallah, and foster mercy and love for one another within our hearts. So brothers and sisters, once again, this is our noble brother, Sheikh Ubaydullah Evans, who's with us very frequently. Please, mashallah, pray for him. And he is from the Alim program, and he graduate also from, where is it from? Columbia?
No, I attended. I didn't graduate. I actually left Columbia to do religious studies. So the only place I graduated from was Azhar.
Mashallah. So graduate of Azhar, but thank you, Sheikh. Thank you for everybody who attended, and shout out again to Tissa for co-sponsoring it. And we'll see all of you guys soon, inshallah.
Inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam, Sheikh.